Good morning, students. Welcome to your English class. Today's lesson is going to be on story writing. Now, I'm sure all of you must have read a lot of stories till now. You must have heard of stories from your parents or grandparents. But today we're going to learn how to write a story um, and what is the structure of story writing, what the points to remember while you're writing a story. Now, story writing is also called narrative writing, as you will be able to see on your screen in this slide. Narration, because while you're writing a story, you're actually narrating an event that has happened in the past. Okay, but for story writing, essentially, it is not based on true events. The story writing is fictional. It is not true. Okay, it depends on the imagination of the author. Now, what exactly is a short story? Okay, so we will be dealing with short stories. And while you're writing a short story, how will you get to know that you're doing it in the right way? So, for that, we need to know what is a short story, first of all. So, a short story is telling us about a single event or experience. It is fictional, as I just told you, it is not based on real life events. Then the word limit for a short story writing is from 500 to 15,000 words in length. Okay. The story that we'll be writing in grade 8 will range from somewhere around 180 to 250 words. It has a beginning, middle, and end. Okay. So, students, this is the key concept in order for you to write a good story, that it should have a beginning, middle, and end. We call it the BME formula. Okay, never forget that without a clear beginning, middle, and ending, your story can never be complete. Okay, then your story should create an impression on the reader. So just tell me one thing: whenever you read a story, if it is not interesting, if it is uh, it becomes boring in parts, there are no twists and turns, nothing new for you to discover when you are reading a story, or when you are hearing a story or listening to a story from someone, you tend to lose interest in it. Okay, so the same goes when you're writing a story. As an author, as the writer of a story, I have to be very, very careful that I write my story in a way that the readers, my audience should be intrigued. I have to keep them engaged in the story. I have to write it in that manner. Okay. Now, we'll read a little more about a short story. A short story is brief, as I talked about it. The word itself, the term itself, short story means it has to be brief, okay, as compared to a novel per se, okay. A novel is really long, lengthy, bulky, but a short story is uh, shorter in length. It is fictional, based on the author's imagination, and it deals with fewer characters. Of course, your short story will have maximum 6 to 7 characters, not more than that. Whereas if you compare it with a novel, you might, or even although this is prose, so we can't really compare it with drama or poetry, but a short story will have 6 to 7 characters. They can be living, all non-living objects. Okay, whereas a novel might have, or like, near about, say, what, 20 characters, or even more than that at times. Okay, story writing is an art. Of course, it is an art. Okay, you have the most important things, skills, or if I may say, um, the potential that you need to develop uh, is your imagination and your creativity. A good story always needs thinking out of the box. Okay, if it is usual, it is not going to appeal to the readers. Okay, now see, um, if ever we go to watch a movie, or we watch a movie at home, and of course, every movie needs a story on which the movie is made. Okay, which is the basis for the movie. The same way, when you go to a theater to watch a movie, if the movie is boring, if it is not interesting enough, if the characters are not portrayed well, if the plot is not well put together, if the ending is very abrupt, you'll not like the movie. Of course, any viewer would not like it. The same way, if the story's characters are not well um, built, and if their details are not given in the right manner, if the plot is not well thought of, if the ending is not you know satisfactory, then the reader will not like the story, and therefore the purpose of writing the story will be defeated. Okay, so we have to keep these things in mind. Now, story writing is the oldest form of written composition. Okay, it is a work of imagination, as we discussed, uh, and it is written with understandable grammatical structure. Of course, grammar is one thing that you have to be very particular about. Punctuation, capitalization, grammar, most importantly, tenses. Okay, you have to make sure that your story is in the past tense. Although the subcategories of the past tense can differ. Okay, it can be continuous, it can be perfect, it can be simple. A short story is meant to be read in a single sitting, and therefore it should be as direct and as brief as possible. Of course, when I sit with, say, a novel in my hand and I plan to read that novel, I'll definitely, even if I sit for long stretches of time, I'll take at least 2 to 3 days to get done with the novel. Whereas a short story is generally read by a person in one go. That is why it should be engaging enough for the reader to sit in one go and read the whole story. Okay, to write a good story, the writer needs to have a clear plot in his mind. Of course, if I don't have a rough sketch, an outline of my story, I'll not be able to write my story well. Okay, so I need to have the basic events in mind, so that on that plot I'm able to develop my story. Okay, the same way as in exams, sometimes, or even otherwise, you must have seen you're given one line, a beginning, or maybe an outline of the story, the major events. That's basically the plot of the story on which you have to develop the story, adding details to it. Then the events need to be arranged as sequential manner. Of course, a story can never be good if it is not in the correct sequence. Okay, so the sequence, the series of events has to be well placed. Then there should be some interesting twists and surprise elements in the story in order to make it interesting. Of course, you need to add some intense, interesting, surprising twists and turns, okay, in your story in order to the hold on to the attention of your readers, okay, in order to make it more interesting for the reader, so that when I'm reading your story, I am always curious about what is about to happen next. Now, how does the structure of a story, if I have to present it in the form of a graph, in the form of this curve that I've made, graphical representation, it will look like a mountain. Okay, a mountain like structure. I'm sure you can see this on your screen now. What does this mountain like structure mean? Please avoid whatever, like what else is written on the screen right now. Whatever you can see, just focus on that graphical representation, that mountain like structure, and see, your story will start. The B refers to begin. Okay, it will begin, and the longest stretch in your curve that you can see, in this curve, is the M, which is your middle. That's the lengthiest, the longest stretch, which means that 70% of my major events are going to fall in this category. I start with a flat beginning, which means in the beginning I'm going to introduce my characters, I'm going to introduce my setting. Setting means the place and the time and the situation in which your story is based. Beginning done, small part, 10%, say 10% of that, then 70% in the middle. In the middle, you're going to add all the major events that are there in your story. Then comes the highest, the peak of your mountain, which is your climax. Now, what does climax mean? Again, I'll take the reference of a movie here. Um, uh, you go and watch a movie, okay? So there's a climax in a movie also. The same way in the story also, the point where the most important and intense event lies, that is the climax of your story. This climax is that point, is that event from where we cannot go back. You know, we only have to move forth, move forward, downwards, finding a solution to the problem that we have faced in this climax zone. Okay, don't worry if it is confusing right now. It might appear to be, but I'll take the example of an actual short story through which we'll understand it better. Now, from this climax, I'll move downwards, okay, towards my ending, which is here, which is written as E on your slide. Okay, that is my ending. In the ending, I have to make sure that I give a solution to the problem that we encountered during the climax. Okay. Now coming to the rest of the terms that are mentioned in the slide, characters. Characters, without a character, your story can never be complete. Okay, so there have to be a couple of characters in your short story. Uh, and then there is setting, as I discussed. That setting is the place and the time of the happening of the events of in your story. Then it has to have the BME formula. Never forget that: beginning, middle, and end. Clear beginning, middle, and end. Okay, 10% is beginning, middle is almost 70%, and then 20% is from climax to your end. Problem or conflict basically here refers to the climax only. Whatever issues are occurring in the climax, those we are going to solve and provide a solution to towards the end. Now, components of the story, as we just discussed, we're going to go through them again. The plot, which should be simple and direct, of course interesting. Setting, which is where and when the story is taking place. Characters, different characters of your story. Now, your characters can either be living or non-living. Okay, even you can have animals or humans. Okay, they can be trees, plants, whatever. You can give a voice to your characters. See, the art of an author, when you're writing a story, yourself will become an author. Okay, so the art of an author is to bring the characters, to bring your story to life. The best story is the one where you, the reader, can actually picturize the whole story in front of his eyes while they're reading it. Okay, so you have to bring your story to life. And how will you do that? By bringing your characters to life. How will you bring your characters to life? You can give a voice to your inanimate objects. Okay, you can, in the living objects, in your living characters, you can use dialogues and conversations to make them more lively. Details can be added like this. Okay, now, coming to the climax, as we discussed, it is the turning point of a story when the main character's problem begins to be solved or resolved, when we are moving towards the end. Just remember that graphical representation in your mind. We can also think of the climax as the most important and exciting moment in an entire story. The fifth one is a theme. Now, students, whenever we read a story, okay, whenever you must have, read a story, there is always a central theme to a story around which my whole story revolves, okay? And this is with every story that you write. The central idea or the main belief of the story is the theme. Every word of the story should be written related to the theme, of course. If my theme is, say, work is worship, okay, that my work is equivalent to worshipping God. So all the elements of my story, all the events should revolve around that theme. It's not that I'll go to some other theme and I'll distract myself. That kind of disconnects the story, okay? So make sure that your story is weaved around your major theme, okay? Now, again, meaning of the basic and the most important components of a story are the following: plot, the series of related events that make up the story; setting of the story, as I discussed with you people, including the time, the place, and environment of the story. Now, what do I mean by environment? Environment is when the time in which my story is based, what is happening around my character. Okay, in that time, for example, if I'm writing a story, say about the struggles of people um, during 1930s and 40s, I will uh, add in some details related to the time of partition. Okay, the time where the partition of India and Pakistan was taking place. So that is the social environment. If some major social event was happening during the time when you're writing the story, you can add those details. Now that is in your hands. Okay. Next, characters. Of course, without the characters, your story can never be complete. Here they've given an example of Ron in Harry Potter, or Potter himself, or Hermione. Different characters are there. So characters, if you um, portray your characters very effectively, a lot of times we remember the story because of the characters. Okay, so that is also one thing that you can really work upon. And then again, the climax, the moment of the highest interest and greatest emotion, the turning point of our story. Again, focus always on the BME formula, beginning, middle, and end. We'll just go through um, what we can add in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. So, in the beginning, as I discussed with you people, introducing your settings, introducing your characters, explaining the basic situation with which we are going to kind of kickstart our story. Middle will have most of the events, describe what happened, use transition words that show time and order. Now, transition, what does that mean? Uh, Even when you're watching this PPT, the slides, I've added transitions to my PowerPoint slides. Okay, transitioning is when I am moving from one event to another. So, in order to, uh, you know, um, tell the reader about these transitions, I'll use words like suddenly, as soon as, before, meanwhile, okay, just to show the movement, just to um, enhance the story, the actions in the story, okay. And towards the end, as I told you, we have to give a solution to the problems that we encountered during the middle and the climax part. Explain how the story ends, describe what happens to the characters and how problems get solved. Okay. So till now we were just talking about what a story is, what are the basic components, what are the things that I have to keep in mind. Okay, the BME formula, climax, the graphical representation. Now we'll actually see it working. The title of our story, I'm sure all of you must have read this story, heard this story somewhere at some point of time in your life. The Little Red Riding Hood. Okay. Um, so here, taking this particular story in account, we have done the same graphical representation. If you can see the mountain-like structure, and I have here explained how in this story we start from the blue part, which is the beginning, and the green part is our middle, the longest stretch. As I told you, 70% of my events take place here. Then my climax, the top of my mountain, and the red part is your moving towards the solution. And again, the flat brown part is your end or conclusion. Now, you all must be aware with the story of Little Red Riding Hood, a little girl who was tricked by a wolf, um, who ate the grandmother of the girl first, and then ate he ate gulped the girl herself. And um, this whole part was the climax. And towards the solution, what happens is the woodsman is able to make out what had happened there in grandmother's house, and he kills the wolf and rescues grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood. Now I'll just read through these parts. Little Red Riding Hood has prepared a basket of goodies for her grandmother. She begins walking through dangerous woods to deliver the basket. This is the beginning. I've told who's my character, Little Red Riding Hood, then the situation and the setting. Also, I have told woods here means the forest. Okay, dangerous. So, all these terms I've used to set the mood of my story. Forest, dark, there's risk, there's danger involved. Okay, Now I move towards the major events of my story. The big bad wolf spots Little Red walking in the woods and asks her where she's going with the basket of treats. The wolf runs to the grandmother's house, eats her, puts her puts on her bonnet, glasses, and nightgown and climbs into her bed. Little Red arrives at her grandmother's house and sits on a stool at the disguised wolf's bedside. Little Red questioned all things that appeared different about her grandmother. Now comes the climax part. As I told you, this is the most intense and the most important and the um, part where there are all the twists and turns involved. Little Red comments on the wolf's nose, eyes, ears, and teeth, and he responds by eating her in one gulp. The most intense. Do you see how intense the scene is? The little girl is able to make out that there is a difference between this grandmother, okay? This person who's claiming to be the grandmother doesn't look like grandmother. She's able to spot, kind of, she's able to see through the wolf's trickery, okay? She's able to, now she's started questioning all these things. And what does the wolf do? It immediately gulps her in one go. Okay, so now we have to find a solution to this climax that we have reached. What to do now? What will happen? Now coming towards the end and looking for a solution, the woodsman arrives on the scene to discover the wolf dressed as the grandmother and quickly surmises what has transpired in the woman's cottage. The woodsman is able to make out what the wolf has done, and in the ending, as a solution, the woodsman kills the wolf and outsteps the grandmother and Little Red happy and safe. So we have finally found a solution, a satisfactory ending to our story. I hope it's clear now. Now, students, talk about the format of story writing. It's the easiest, okay? The major part is your title. Now, students, your title, I would suggest that you write once you're done writing the story, okay? If not the final draft, at least the first draft that you make, okay? The rough draft that you make, once you are done writing the story in the first draft, only after doing that you should write the title, because then you'll be able to um, pick a more suitable and a better title for your story, instead of writing the title first and then going with your story. Don't do that, do it the other way around. Again, for the rest of the story, the BME formula goes beginning, middle, and end, divided into paragraphs. Remember, whenever there's a new event, start with a new line. I'm not saying change the paragraph, change the line at least. Okay. Please keep in mind the word limit. It shouldn't exceed the word limit, and the word limit will be mentioned in your questions. So take that into serious consideration. And that is all. You don't have to mention your name also, only the title and then your story. Now, how can I self-assess my stories? This is the success criteria for writing a good story. These are the points that you have to keep in mind while writing a story. And after, um, you know, through this checklist, you can actually assess your own stories if you're writing it in a good manner or not. I'll include a beginning, a middle, and ending. I'll create a setting by writing about who, what, where, and when. I'll create a problem. Now, here I'll create a problem does not mean that I'll create some problem on my own. It basically means that you need to have some problem in your story which you will actually solve towards the end. Okay, so that climax part. I'll solve the problem. Of course, I'll give it a satisfactory ending, and I'll include details and descriptions. Now, what does this mean? Details and descriptions can be for anything in your story. It can be for your setting. You can give details of your setting to set the mood, the tone of your story, as I discussed. Then you can give details for your characters, okay? For which you can use dialogue and conversation. You can use direct speech to show that there is an exchange of dialogues between your characters. You can give characteristic particular traits for your characters. This way you can add different details and descriptions to your story. Moving forward, we come to the end of this lesson, students. Here I've given you this link. You can click on this link and watch the video for reference on YouTube. In this video you'll be able to get a quick recapitulation, okay, of the whole lesson that we've done till now. Also, this video particularly is based on another story, okay, so you will get one more example. So I'd advise you people to go and watch this video as well. It basically covers the same points that we have discussed till now, okay. And one thing that I would like to tell you, which you should keep in mind if you want to be a good writer, you cannot use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have it. This quote is by the most famous, one of the most famous women writers, Maya Angelou. And she says that, you know, creativity is one thing that you can never get um over with. Okay, you, the more you'll use it, the more you'll have it, the more you'll be able to generate it. So be creative, be imaginative, and write the best stories possible. All the best, students, and thank you for listening to this lesson.